Our next speaker is Mel Choyce-Dawn. Mel is a product designer working at Automatic. She is currently focusing on designing themes that show off the best Gutenberg can offer. Today, Mel will share her creativity and show you how you can produce some unique and interesting layouts by combining different blocks. Take it away, Mel.
Hello, WPBlockTalk. I hope everyone's been having a great day learning about the WordPress block editor. I'm Mel. I'm a product designer. I've been involved in the WordPress community for many years now. I'm a core committer. I led the 4.9 core release cycle. And recently I've been working on Gutenberg block patterns and on themes. So today I want to talk to you about making unique designs by combining blocks. So let's start with the basics and talk about the building blocks of block building. There are a couple key blocks that form the basis of most content. So these are the fundamentals used by the vast majority of websites. At its simplest, we have the paragraph block. The paragraph block has a prompt that encourages you to write. So you get started. You can add inline formatting like bold or italic text. You can add links. You could change the text alignment, and you could also change the text color and the background color. We have the heading block. Headings range from H1 to H6, but you'll most likely stay within the H2 to H4 range most of the time, which is what's offered up in the toolbar that appears when you select the block. So try to avoid using headings for decoration and instead stick to using the appropriate semantic level. The list block is useful for, adding any sort of list to your website. So often you can turn a long paragraph into a list just to make the content a little bit easier to digest. It's just a really great way to enhance the readability of your website and the scannability. Gutenberg provides 2 default quote styles and also 2 default pull quote styles. There are tons of great opportunities for bold, attention-grabbing text by using these 2 quotes, especially if you're writing like blog posts, articles, any sort of news or editorial content where you do have quotes. And then finally, WordPress supports images, galleries, audio, video, all sorts of multimedia. By combining media and text, you can create rich, dynamic layouts that stand out from your average website. WordPress also provides a number of default layout blocks you can use to provide structure for your basic blocks. So remember spacer GIFs? It's a little bit like that. So if you don't have control over your site's CSS or you don't want to write any code, you can actually use a spacer block to add more space between elements on your site. It is super useful for designers and non-technical site builders especially. So there's the separator block as well, also known as a horizontal rule. It just adds like a line or any other sort of decorative break between the elements on your site. It's really great for dividing, say, like a heading from some content or creating a separation between 2 different sections on your site. So this is where we start to get a little bit more complex. The group block allows you to, group multiple blocks together into one unit. For example, if you want to have a section on your homepage with a different background color, the group block could be the way to go. So if you've worked in Photoshop, Sketch, Figma, any sort of design tool, you are familiar with the idea of grouping things together. It's really kind of the same thing. Columns. Columns are by far one of the most useful blocks WordPress has introduced. So prior to the column block, adding multiple columns to a WordPress page was a clunky experience, often requiring shortcodes. I personally, as a designer, I hate shortcuts. Like what they can achieve, but just like the process of adding them has always been really clunky. So now you can create and edit columns completely visually, and you don't have to worry about leaving out a closing tag and breaking your whole layout by accident, which I have definitely done before. The cover block is a great way for adding a hero image or a banner to your site, or you can use it to make bold pull quotes that break up articles. You can add a background color, image, or video, and you could overlay it with text and other blocks, so it's really versatile. The media and text block provides a quick and easy way to add text next to an image or video, which is a common pattern we see all across the web. So combining a media and text block, just like a couple stacked in a row, especially if you flip the arrangement, so you have image on the left, text on the right, text on the left, image on the right, etc. It's just a really easy way to create a dynamic homepage with very little content. And then lastly, if you want to add 3 latest posts to your site's homepage, you can do that really easily now with the latest post block. You could switch between list or grid view, toggle on or off features like featured images and post dates, or even select posts from specific categories, which is really useful if you're building any sort of magazine style layout. So you can have different sections on your homepage for different categories, combine static and dynamic content, really powerful. So let's start kind of thinking about how we can take these building blocks and combine them. So I'm looking to examples on the web right now that I could find that, we can look at them and break them down and see how we can use blocks to replicate these designs. So I like this example because it features a bold, clear intro sentence. This sentence is slightly wider than the 50-50 split column below, which makes it more visually interesting and brings in some balance to the overall layout. So let's break this one down first. This first section, which doesn't span the entire width of the content, can use the column block. So we have 2 columns inside. One that's slightly wider, say like 60 or 70%. That houses this header, and then another empty column that's narrower. So inside that first column is a heading block. We're skipping over the second block, the second column in this columns block, because it is going to be empty. So next we have a second column block that has equal size columns inside. And inside each of these columns is a paragraph. So if we add that into the Gutenberg editor, we get something like this. We can do a lot with this. The theme has a really big impact on how it looks. Right now I have this grouped, so we could add background behind it. You could separate it from another section with a separator block. There's really a lot of opportunities for combining this with other patterns on your page. Here's another example. I really love how attention-grabbing this headline is and the shape that it kind of forms on the page overall. This top text it's just like a centered paragraph. There's nothing really special about this. Next we have this great big heading. And then after that we again have 2 equal width columns. Inside of those are paragraphs. So it's very similar to the previous example. It doesn't look as dramatic in Gutenberg without any additional styles, but a really nice theme can make all the difference. So on this site, the Let's Collaborate bar is such a common pattern, and I love the all caps header off to the side. It's actually something that I tried to design into the 2017 theme that would have worked so much better if we had Gutenberg then. So let's look at how to build it now that we actually have the right tools. So once again, we look at columns. This left column is a heading. It's probably, once again, like 40%. This next column is more 60%, and inside that column, you have a paragraph and then a button block. So it's really just 3 blocks inside of columns. Very simple. Very easy to replicate in Gutenberg. If you wanted to, you could put it inside a group block and add a background color. You could add a nice parallax effects with an image if you use the cover block, or you could leave it as is and it's still going to look really nice. So I love this article because it breaks up the content in a way that feels very editorialized. The gradation of size from the title to the introduction article to the content of the article, it just feels really balanced, and it makes great use of space while keeping the line length short. So it's very easy to read. So we have our first block, which is the heading. Our next block is a separator block, just a nice line between the title and the content. Now we go to having columns, and on the left we have this paragraph that is maybe 55 to 60% of the width, probably more like 55, and the paragraph size is actually set a little bit larger than the default paragraph size. So that's an option you have in the paragraph block, is to change the size. So this next column is full of paragraphs that are just the default size. And when we put that together in Gutenberg, it's the kind of thing that you're definitely going to want to play with just till you get the widths and sizes right, because every theme is different. So this is just default styles, no editor styles. So, if I were to go in and try to get something more like the previous example, I would probably change my theme to make that heading a little bit larger, a little bit more attention grabbing. I might make the introductory paragraph a little bit narrower, etc. So there's a lot of ways that you can take this once you have it in Gutenberg. So this whole site is super dynamic and fun, but I really love the flow of this diagonal section. This layout, actually looks really complex, but it can be broken down using our block toolbox. So once again, we'll start with a cover. This will allow us to add a background image or even just a background color. Inside of that, we'll have columns, and it's 3 equal width columns. Within each column, we have this heading, a separator if we want it, or maybe that's just a style on the heading, and then a paragraph. In the next column, things start to get interesting. You can add a spacer block to actually push the content in the middle column down a little bit so it's offset. And then we do this again in the third column to achieve this kind of flow from top to bottom. So one thing you will want to consider for your own site, if you are using spacers to create this kind of offset layouts, is that you'll want to add a class so you can remove or decrease these spacer heights on smaller screens. We actually might even want to consider approaching this differently by using column alignments instead of spacer blocks. So every single column can take an alignment, top, middle, bottom. So the left could be top aligned, the middle could be center aligned, and then the bottom could be right aligned. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. There's no one way to achieve any sort of layout in the WordPress block editor. Lastly, this gallery is so much more interesting than like 4 evenly sized and spaced images would be. So having the different size and kind of the offset arrangement brings a ton of personality. So first we have our columns. It looks like we have 3 different columns of content. In the first column, we have a spacer, an image, and then another image that's actually been resized so it's smaller than the top one. Our second column is a little bit wider. We have another image that's been resized so it's not necessarily the full width of the column. And then below it, we have a full-sized image. And then in the last column, we have a spacer to push down this content. And then we have the heading and the paragraphs. And this is another one where you could approach it in a couple different ways. For example, if you didn't want to use that spacer, you could use the column alignment and then add a spacer between this body copy and this link. So rather than pushing everything down from the top, you just align everything to the bottom and then add the extra space between the call to action and the paragraph. So just kind of default as is with that spacer, this is how it looks in Gutenberg. We get really close just using our basic building blocks. This is not even using any sort of custom stuff. This is totally what comes with WordPress core. So when you think about it, the possibilities are really endless. You have a lot of different opportunities to combine blocks into really interesting designs. All right, so we have the basics down. Let's take a look at taking these building blocks and then applying them to our own site. So now I'm going to show you some demos. So let's get started with that. For this demo, I've created a fake restaurant website. My gastropub, Onyx and Spoke, is on kind of the higher end of the pub spectrum, so it needs a sharp, elegant design to help the business stand out from its competitors. I've created different combinations of blocks on each page that showcase how you can take relatively simple atomic units like images, headings, and paragraphs and build them into something that grabs your attention and helps you flow through the site. And I have to note, all of this was built with the latest version of the Gutenberg plugin on a stock installation of WordPress without any additional plugins. Next up, let's take a look at how I created each of these pages and what blocks I used. The first element I want to add to my homepage is a hero image with some intro text, so I choose a cover block. I want an image with plenty of empty space on the left side for my content, and I also want my hero image to take up a little more vertical space and have a little more contrast than the default, so I upped the minimum height and changed my overlay color to black. The next section I want to add is a gallery based on one of the examples we looked at earlier. So I add some spacers to a group block to make sure my section has plenty of white space, and then I start setting up my columns. I'm looking to achieve that almost diamond-shaped grid of images. I want to choose photos that are more vertical, so they work better with my desired offset gallery layout. I make use of both spacers, image sizing, and floating to achieve my desired design. Next up, I want to highlight my restaurant's location and hours. I start off with a cover block to create a background for my section and choose an image that shows off the interior of my restaurant. I select the fixed background setting in the sidebar to give it a smooth scrolling effect. Inside my cover, I add a group block so that I can select a background color for my content. And then inside of that, I add some columns with my restaurant information. Looking good! I want to save this block so I can reuse it on other pages, so I add the whole section to my reusable blocks library. Because my restaurant is magical and made up, it likes to keep its digital presence current, so it blogs every week or two. I know, it's a little unrealistic, but I want to highlight these posts in a section of my homepage. I reach for the latest post block, showing off my most recent 3 posts in a grid. I show off my featured images and excerpts to give the customers a preview of each post. Finally, I want to add a section at the very bottom of the homepage that calls out some special features of the restaurant: brunch and live music. I add a cover image inside 2 equal-sized columns to call out these features. Having these call-out boxes with background images is a much more interesting design than just putting text alone into some columns. Like my homepage, I want to start my About page with a hero. This time, instead of using an image, I've decided to add a subtle background video to make the page a little bit more interesting. I give it a similar treatment to my other cover blocks, making it taller and giving it a darker overlay. The next section of this page tells a little bit about my team. I want to use images to draw in my customers and help them feel like they're a part of the process. I borrow the idea of having a wider heading and narrower copy from some previous examples that I found. Then I add in my images. First, a big photo of my team, then a column block with 2 smaller photos showing them in action, finished with a caption. Change the sizing of my columns so my images flow from largest to smallest, creating a more dynamic layout. I want to create a division between this section and my next section. I add in some spacer blocks surrounding a separator, and then save it so I can reuse it later. For my next section, I want to highlight my restaurant's chef owner. I opt for a media and text block since I know I want to show off one photo of the chef and a short biography about him. Because my photo has the chef tilted towards the left, I flip my media and text layout so my chef is now facing my content, helping to draw the eye to the text. To help the section stand out from the white background behind it, I add a light cream-colored background color to the block. My last unique section for this page is all about hype. I proudly proclaim an award this restaurant has received, along with a photo of excited customers cheersing. Then I opt for a 2-column layout with testimonials on the left, slightly wider, and some more copy about my restaurant on the right, slightly smaller. Finally, I finish it with my hours and location block. My menu page starts the same as my other pages, with a cover block. For this page, I want to highlight my restaurant's best menu item, its super awesome burgers. I adjust the focal point on my background image to bring more of the burger into view. I add my page title, and then, since my restaurant has a lot of different menus depending on the meal, I add in a navigation block so that I can anchor link to those sections of the page later on. So we don't have a menu block, but we can build a pretty nice looking menu out of our basic building blocks: columns, images, and paragraphs. I want to show off a couple different layouts you can use to bring visual interest to any restaurant menu you design. Our first layout starts out with 2 rows of 3 columns. Each column has its own menu item. I'm using text formatting here to bring hierarchy to my content. This is going to be the basis for all of the different menus on this page. This layout could be improved by adding some images. To this first layout, I add a 3-column gallery to show off various appetizers my restaurant offers. Let's add our next menu section. For this section, I want to try integrating an image in with the menu items. So I add an image to one of my columns. In this next menu section, I want to try using a slightly different layout. I add a subtitle to the section to note sides. Instead of columns, I use a media and text block to show off my menu's shining star, its classic burger. I follow that up with a regular row of menu items. Lastly, I have one more layout I want to try. I add one large image above the rows and menu items in this section. Each of these layouts uses the same components, but they're rearranged differently to create unique designs. If you're building a real website, you might actually just want to stick with one layout and then reuse it throughout your page. Maybe emphasizing certain elements as needed. Play around and figure out what layouts work best with the content you have. It doesn't take a lot to create really nice layouts from blocks. So now I just wanted to take a moment to compare this site that we just built with another site using the exact same content but running a different theme. See, one of the beautiful things about building with these core blocks is that they're supported on every up-to-date WordPress site, so you can switch themes without losing any sort of content. Let's switch on over. I also want you to get a sense for how theme styles can make a huge difference when it comes to the presentation of core blocks. So the bold sans serif headlines look very different from the thin serifs of the other theme, and the dark color scheme gives it a completely different vibe. It's all the same content, it's just different colors and different fonts. I hope everyone now has a basic understanding of how to combine blocks in the WordPress editor into attractive layouts. So now, go forth and build, have some fun. Thank you so much for attending my talk, and I hope you all have a great night.